Could I make a couture Met Gala dress on theme in just 3 weeks? Or maybe the real question is, could I finish it in just one? I challenged myself to create a look for the Met Gala in just 21 days. The first week, inspiration hunting. The second week, a chaotic bodice mock-up, and an unhinged idea that involved upcycling neckties. It was the final week. All I had left to do was make it. But you already know, those are famous last words. Here's the spoiler. Yes, the dress got done. There's an insane reveal at the end of this video that you won't want to miss, but not in 7 days like I planned. It took 10. Turns out, making a couture dress out of hand-built fabric, it didn't behave the way I expected it to. This might actually be a more complicated design than if I was just setting out to make a couture suit. I'm self-taught. I've never made a couture dress or skirt before. This wasn't just about creating my first ever dress. It was about trusting the process even when things started to fall apart, and having the confidence to choose to keep going even when the deadline was already blown. So if you want to see what actually happens when you try to make a Met Gala dress in just 3 weeks, stick around, because this is the full circle moment we've been waiting for. We started with a very solid plan, a woven tie jacket dress. This was a new technique I'd never tried before, weaving strips of ties that had been cut to resemble bias tape, or strips of fabric that were cut on a diagonal so they would retain a good amount of stretch. We'd already done the prototype, so I dove right in. The color combinations were daunting, and the implications of a misstep felt permanent. So I spent a lot of time contemplating how to put these different pieces together in a way that would be visually appealing and not overstimulating. Using tape here wasn't ideal, but I don't really have a loom, I guess, to do the weaving on to hold this tension. So tape is the best I have, knowing that I'm going to be cutting all of this off at some point, but also that it's just packing tape. So the worst that it could do is maybe create like a run in one of the ties. Before I lift this up, I am going to be pinning all of these together so that they will hopefully hold even when it's released, as long as outer edge is fixed. So hopefully that will work. I'm really happy with how this is looking now. It looks really beautiful. I did change the color scheme. The first iteration that I had done felt a little bit too preppy when I compared it to the other color combinations I had for the other pieces. The next version that I had felt a little bit too dark. Adding this little bit of red silk in here with the paisley print feels like it brightens it up quite a bit and starts to get to what I want it to be. I'm really glad my tape idea worked this far, but I'm a bit nervous about what's going to happen when I take it off. So I'm going to go ahead and add just some cotton muslin like bias tape to the edge so that there's something kind of holding these in place. Hi, careful, there's pins. So it's taken me about 3 hours to get this far, and then I have 1, 2, 5 pieces for the front that all need to be woven, and then there's the back and the sleeves. I was initially thinking that I might run out of ties to be able to do all of it, but now I'm thinking I might run out of time to do all of it. So what I'm going to focus on now is doing the weaving pieces for the front part of the jacket, and then checking where I'm at. Maybe I can do the next pieces a little bit faster, but at least the effect is working. I was a bit worried yesterday when I realized that this was a lot more time consuming of a process than I had originally thought, that I might rush it a bit and screw something up, and sure enough, I have. I was noticing that my repeat didn't seem very consistent, and there's only a single stripe of green here. Then down here, I have now botched the repeat a bit too because of that green should also be here. So I need to remedy that. Now this one is out of weave order, so I need to take that out. Scoop this one up. When the temporary muslin was removed, my solution had been to use fusible interfacing on the back of the piece to keep those edges intact before I started trimming it to fit the pattern piece perfectly. But because of the fact that the fabric was woven, there were pieces on the front that never would touch that interfacing on the back. So I had to add a double-sided interfacing between the layers in order to try to keep everything from falling apart. Feeling semi-confident, I jumped into the ultimate test of cutting out the pattern pieces. Shockingly, it held together, at least for now. I made quick work of the next bodice piece, but yes, it also was the smallest. And then went back and cut that main center front piece, postponing it as long as possible to make sure I knew what I was doing before I cut it out. I had 3 pieces woven and cut out, ready to be joined together, but for a second I forgot how they actually fit together. I did have the original pattern pieces at hand, and they quickly solved that problem. Good thing I checked before I started sewing them up. Happy Saturday! Oh, so I've gotten my hair cut, which is lovely because it's getting way too long. But we also only have one more day to work on this since we are supposed to be shooting the finished look tomorrow. Where we're at now is we have woven pieces for all of the top section, which look incredible. I'm really, really happy with how they turned out, but they were much more time consuming than I was expecting them to be. One thing I wasn't expecting is how thick the woven ties are once they're all put together, which I guess makes sense based on how tightly they're woven. I will not have time to make all of the other pieces in the woven ties in 24 hours. So what does that mean for our design? I think we can keep the woven pieces how they are with that entire top just looking gorgeous and finished. But I would like the lower 2 pieces of the jacket that currently aren't woven to be made out of something else, another fabric that then goes into almost like a mini skirt. I'm not sure I love that front kind of flap panel anymore. I think instead we're gonna go more of a shorter skirt and then build off the sides of that. I have a lot of fabric options that might go well here. This is the advantage of having a bunch of dead stock and vintage materials just kind of lying around. Earlier when I had said I might want to pull in some more of the color, another print, I'm a little hesitant now to do so because I do think there is such a strong yet mixed color story happening already. I'm actually leaning more towards a suiting fabric. I have this wool tweed that you've seen me use a million times. However, it's a little bit too thick. This is a tablecloth, I think, but I still think it's a little bit too much at the moment. Same with this vintage fabric. I do have some silk that would be kind of nice, but I don't think that's it. Yeah, I think it's gonna be between this herringbone wool, or this is also a wool, but a wool suiting, so it's pretty thin. If I can walk you through my thought process at the moment, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be this because this actually has navy in it rather than this one, which is just gray and black. And if you notice in the ties, there are no black ties. There are only navy ties because I don't really like using black. And there was a lot of blue, which I think is really beautifully mixed in here. So I think it's going to be this one, which then gives us our marching orders. We're running out of time here and I need to be less ambitious. So let's resketch to try to arrange our thoughts a bit, try to find the right material and see where we can go from there. It was finally time to start putting things together. I mean, honestly, we were past the time when we should be putting things together, but I had finally gotten to it. Pressing the ties was a bit tricky. You can see really clearly just how many layers ended up within the seam allowance. I went a bit gangbusters with the steam to try to get that inside seam as flat as possible. And all that careful detail was absolutely worth it when you saw how crisp and clean it looked from the outside once those very thick seams had been pressed flat. The shape of the jacket was quite tricky, so I did have to reference my pattern pieces quite often. This is usually easier when you've already done a mock-up, but since I kind of did my mock-up in reverse, I fitted it, sewed it, and then took it apart and made pattern pieces out of it without ever then re-sewing it back up. To get familiar with all of the curves, it still was fairly foreign territory as I was putting this together. So I had to be meticulous and thoughtful. I had to determine at this point how to close the front of the dress. We had the wrap, top part of the jacket, and I had sketched a way for the closure to then also wrap across the skirt front as well. I cut that out of the suiting wool and laid it out, only to have a realization. It just wouldn't have the same effect without that side panel and the front being made out of the woven ties. I made a decision that felt counterintuitive to the limitations of the time running out because I needed to protect the integrity of the design. It just had to have that side panel be made out of the ties and the front section as well that carried down into the skirt. I felt like without those pieces, it just wouldn't look like the same garment. So I doubled down and went back to weaving Good morning from Sunday, big reveal day. We're not ready for the reveal quite yet though, but I think that's okay because we had a big storm last night, and so outside is currently just pouring rain still. So last night I finished the weaving of this primary centerpiece after determining that it needed to be made out of the ties in order to just bring this together. So the pattern piece hasn't been fully cut out yet, but it's going to come under here, connect, and then form the front panel of the skirt. I need one more panel for this side, which I started on last night, but my color combinations were just not working. These two are going to be joined together. I think that's going to look really great. So then the only other things I need to do are do the third panel here, and then construct the rest of the dress that won't be made from ties for a closure, some hemming, and then we'll be done. Not too much to do, right? So many things during this process were brand new to me. And I enjoy sharing those uncertain moments where I was just figuring things out as I went. Trying something new each time, because that's where the learning and the growth happens. That's also the space that you inhabit as a fashion designer. Each time something doesn't work out, I would figure out a new solution and then gain some knowledge and keep going. I was happy I'd taken the extra time to add those panels, not just because that really rounded out the look of the dress, but also because I had this opportunity to weave in the front panel a navy and white striped tie that perfectly tied in my wool suiting fabric to the patchwork of the dress. But it can be very mentally taxing to work so long like this, problem solving every step of the way. But it does feel a lot like a muscle, and like it gets stronger the more that you do it. Which is one of the reasons I keep taking on challenges like this, even when they don't go exactly the way I planned, so that the next time I'll be better prepared and I'll keep building that muscle. And I hope that by sharing this process, that also inspires you to try something that normally would make you uncomfortable and would push you to grow a little bit. Today is definitely the most difficult day for me in this process. It's Monday morning, so I have overshot my target deadline, but we will keep going and we will get this finished. I was working late into the evening last night and ended up hitting some snags that I wasn't expecting that have to do with the woven fabric. How I would usually do the lining is by turning the piece inside out, and on this lower body section, it's worked really nicely. However, as you are turning it inside out, it relaxes the tension that's on the woven pieces, which meant that late last night I had a piece almost completely fall apart, which was the point at which I was like, okay, I'll stop and revisit this in the morning. So I left it. We're not going for perfection here. So this piece, which is going to be the closure down here, needs the lining, and then the top piece that goes over it does as well. This one actually worked really, really nicely. It's not as beautiful as I would normally like the lining to be, but it is very stable, which is the goal. So this morning I have the task of trying to stabilize that big, it's that really large piece, and try to keep that weave intact. and then revisit the dress piece. There were some fit issues yesterday when I was doing that. I had attached this skirt and it's fitting weirdly, so I need to adjust that fit as well. To come up with the pattern for the back of the dress, I had decided to use my tulle and then just kind of slap a skirt on the bottom. But the goal was to have it be a tailored shape that fit perfectly. And I'm sure you can guess where this is going. A tailored back piece to a dress where you just kind of estimate where the curve of your butt might be and the darts need to go is a terrible idea. It didn't fit right. It pulled every which way. The bodice was fitting so beautifully, and I was still struggling with the back. I just decided to throw in the towel with the back and start over. So I decided to recut the back without anything except for the neck darts, and then lean into my strengths of being able to fit a piece well on the body. Sometimes it really does help to know what you're good at and what you're not. And guessing on a flat pattern with the dart size turns out to not be my strength, but pinning on a form and taking things in so that it fits and falls exactly like it should is something that I'm very good at. On the second try, I got it right and actually had a beautifully fitted jacket. And something I will say as you look at the piece on the mannequin, please remember that the mannequin is not fitted to my body shape at all. And so every single time that I need to make an adjustment, that I need to place a closure, I have to try on the dress to remind myself that, yes, it fits exactly the way it needs to. Here's where the closure should be. And then when I re-put it on the mannequin, it has some extra room. For the sleeve shape, I wanted something that was going to be low effort and tie it in with the woven features on the jacket. So I decided to take a blazer sleeve pattern piece I already had and add some extra space at the sleeve head so that I could create 2 tucks at the top of each sleeve to give the illusion like they might be a piece of a tie coming out of that sleeve and then blending into the jacket. So there's a little bit of irony here. When I had first started setting out to do this, I thought that the best way to hold the different woven pieces in place would be if I hand tacked all the places where they crossed. But then I didn't end up doing that. I ended up trying to use some interfacing and trying to do like a faster method. But then the irony is now that it's a full garment and it's on the mannequin, anytime that especially these shoulder pieces flex a lot, what started happening is the ties will actually curl in because all of that tension that was holding the weave in place gets released. I thought I had this like faster method that was going to be great, that was going to work so well, and then here I am in the 11th hour doing exactly that tedious hand tacking that I thought I might do at the beginning. I'm just doing like a teeny stitch where these pieces intersect, and in some cases not even going like all the way through the tie so that it's not visible, but just holding those corners in place so that when it flexes, the ties don't roll, you don't see through it, which is also important since this really isn't meant to have a garment underneath. So up here have been tacked, so you see they are kind of bending inwards, but before what they do is actually curl like this. So just that little tacking helps it to hold its shape so that once it's put on, it will go back to the shape that I want. Before I give the neckline its final shape, I need to do some hand tacking here just to hold these pieces in place. I think my assistant is is going to help me. Had I done this earlier, I would have saved myself a lot of heartache, I think, and difficulty. So a good learning that the shortcut really may end up taking you a lot longer. I'm wearing a new tank top under this. The fitting never stops. So I think the neck is actually, if you see all of this here, there's too much fabric. So I didn't quite get the curve right from the shoulder into the neck. The sleeves look gorgeous. I feel like every single time that I'm like, okay, now it's time for something else, anything else. It's like, nope, more tailoring of this stripe piece. So I'm like constantly in a state of undress, trying to just like get everything fitted so I can move on. But I just want it to fit. Round of applause for the dress. It still needs, like, it doesn't have a closure here or here, but it has a closure here on this side and internally. The front is hemmed, the back is not. I need to do something with the sleeves, but I'm like, we need to jump into the skirt, otherwise we're never gonna finish. And I keep having to remind myself the mannequin does not have the same body as me. I don't think we're too far off our sketch, to be honest. Yeah, not bad. We need a skirt situation starting like right here. I've never really made a fluffy skirt before, so there's this tulle as an option. And then I also have silk organza. I don't think I have tons of this left. Oh, maybe I do. My brain was a little bit fried at this point when it came to decision making, so the best thing that I thought I could do in order to get a visual of what this might look like is actually just pin the fabric so I could get an idea for how the volume might look, and then try to decide from there which route to take. I had been leaning towards the mint green and looking at this, even though it doesn't completely match the greens that are in the ties, I still think it's going to be the mint green. The skirt was one of those uncertainties. I'd never done anything like it, but it was the final step to finish this and transform a, yes, beautiful blazer dress into a gown. While trying to decide what to do, I saw a woman walking down the street carrying an armload full of, I kid you not, floppy lettuce. It looked almost like an AI-generated image. The stack was so high. The leaves were so wide. And with every step, they all just had this beautiful synchronized bounce. And I was transfixed. I would have snapped a photo, but I was driving. All I could do was race home and make a sketch and think what a beautiful skirt shape that would make. But maybe not for this go round. Research and references always make me feel more confident in my decision making, and after reading about gathers and flounces, I decided to do some gathered layers with a top circle cut flounce. Everything I saw said that you should attach the layers to each other, with the top layer being last. But the only skirt I really had lots of experience with was 15 years of looking at tutu structures, so I decided for better or worse, I was going to follow my instincts and keep the layers separate. And then attach them from the top down. It was so much tulle, and I have to say, having had tulle but never really used it for much, this part of the process was just such a delight. think we all should make more tulle skirts in the future. It turned out that starting with the top of the skirt was a mistake because by the time I'd attached all of the lower layers, it did skew the shape of that top layer and created a tension that wasn't there at the beginning. So as my last step, even though everything else was done, I decided to take off the top 2 layers of the skirt and reattach them one more time. So we just finished shooting the big reveal. I can't believe it's actually done. I could keep working on this for probably another couple of months, making everything perfect. It's like Project Runway. You're never really done, you're just out of time. So how did we do? You're the judge. Let me know in the comments, do we like the outfit? Did you like the process? I ended up loving the skirt. I had no idea I was gonna enjoy the skirt making process. I felt a little bit like a kid in a candy store under all of those layers of tulle. That was so much fun. Why have I not done this before? One of the things I've been seeing since we did end up finishing this after the Met Gala was a lot of the roasts out there looking at different Met Gala outfits, assessing them based on kind of fit to theme and then just whether people liked it or not. Within the context of, does this fit the menswear suiting tailored for you? Repurpose ties into a new fabric with other suiting fabric? I think the answer is very much yes. I think the tutu skirt thing is a bit of a non sequitur, but it's also something that's very unique to me and so much fun. I also want to take a second and just reflect on the process. As a self-taught designer, every time I do something like this, take on a new challenge, the goal is to learn a lot. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but I do want to share those with you since I do know how to create a couture jacket. The one class I've ever taken in my kind of fashion education career, it was very hard not to be a true perfectionist about it. Some things that were very frustrating for me in terms of, I don't know, everything from the lining, the fit of the back, just not having enough time. I think part of it was because I was trying to fit it like a dress, but this is suiting fabric. To have that just seamless look, you know, I'm a human with a body. I don't want to see any of my like lumps and bumps. I would have had to put like a horsehair lining behind it, which requires a lot of hand work. A true couture blazer should take non-stop 2 weeks to make. The least part of that is actually fitting. It's all of the internal structure that nobody ever sees. I had wanted to spend that kind of time on this, but I took less than 2 weeks to do the entire thing, and that was very frustrating to me. The way I designed this, kind of unintentionally, it was really about how do I get this on and off. I wanted this closure up here, and I had in the sketch had this like, I don't want to say cummerbund, and then there's a hook over here, and then another one down here, lastly a hook and eye here. You could technically just wear it open, I'm wearing a little romper, like this, or potentially you could hook it and have like a little skirt situation. All of the different options for wearing this makes it so interesting and so much fun. I will caveat this by saying that the lining was not meant to really see the light of day, so please don't judge that. Yes, there are like a ton of things that I would love to change. There's a good chance I'm gonna remake this pattern again. I was really pleasantly surprised by how well I was able to fit the bodice. It definitely is not perfect, but the bodice piece actually hugged the body even at that major seam point, which was pretty incredible. I did just hand stitch the top of this collar because we just need to move on. If you've enjoyed the creative process in this series, you'd love some of the collection making videos. Next week's video is actually about everything I learned while trying to make a full collection in 13 weeks. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out when that video is released. This process has really inspired me to revisit something that I had called the Master Series, where I was recreating and reinterpreting pieces from very famous designers in order to learn from them. An Issey Miyake coat, a Dior bar jacket, and this had been originally trying to figure out how you make a collar connect with a bodice piece on an Alexander McQueen jacket. I did start with a collar that was very inspired by McQueen, and this came out, I would say, if anything, looking very much, to me, a little bit like a Guesquier, a Louis Vuitton creation. He's one of my favorite designers, so it, you know, warms the cockles of my heart to think that this has any resemblance to something that Guesquier might have designed. There's a Yohji Yamamoto quote that says, "Start copying what you love, copy, copy, copy. At the end of the copy, you will find yourself." That's something that I have found to be so true and is a great reminder of how much I love learning through making. I'd love to hear if there's anything in this process that kind of jumped out to you as your favorite part, or you learned something. I always love to hear about that. Let me know in the comments, and make sure you've hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. This has been such a blast. I'm Leigh, and I will see you next time.